Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. It's Monday, March 13th, 2023. And my guest tonight, Timothy Hogan. And we are going to be discussing a lot of topics tonight, but I want to focus on Egypt and, of course, the Knights Templar. And he is the worldwide Grandmaster for the Knights Templar, OTSI. He runs the Templar Collegia in conjunction with it. He has been knighted in France in 2 different orders. He's been knighted in Scotland into the Order of St. Andrews and into the Royal Order of Scotland. He has also been knighted as a Gold Star Sir Knight of the Knights of the Glen. And I'm still waiting for my Templar ring. But I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Timothy Hogan. Timothy, now you're all washed out.
What?
How'd you
I didn't do anything, I promise.
Turn off your lights. No, just oh man, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go with washed out Tim tonight. See, you want to be in disguise.
It's my aura. It's
your aura. Oh man, we had a great sound check. We got everything sussed out, and then Tim's magnetism, his electromagnetic monatomic gold self, has changed all the settings. All right. We're kind of stuck, so let's just go about it tonight. It's the content, Tim. It's not your natural good looks.
Yeah, it's not my glow.
It's not your glow. It's not certainly not your glow, or tonight the abundance of said glow. But I want to. I'm going to start here with something a little philosophical, okay? And it's not the topic of tonight's show, but I just want your opinion. Have you seen the TV show The Last of Us?
I haven't seen it yet. I know the general plot of it. I've certainly read some news stories about it, but I haven't seen it yet.
It's #1 show on TV.
Yeah.
Right. So with that, what is our fascination with the end of the world? Right? We have this fascination with that. And you want a blockbuster movie, you want a blockbuster book, you want all of that stuff, TV series. The end of the world, right? Just go right there. And we're fast. What's the deal with that? Is it the lack? You don't have to pay taxes, right? There's no government. Is it that? Is it the freedom of getting rid of the organization of life? Is it the ability to mow down zombies with clubs and machetes and machine guns without any
aggression out?
Yeah, without breaking any laws. What is it that no moral compass, right? What's the fascination with the end of the world?
I think on some level, maybe subconscious level, people know that society and civilization is extremely fragile, and we tell ourselves this story that we're so great and we're the pinnacle of humanity and that we're so wonderful with our technology and everything else. But the reality is there's any number of things that can really wipe us out any minute, and this isn't the type of thing. Certainly governments don't like to talk about this. Some religious establishments try to take advantage of this fear of this with people, but I think that on some level, we know that it's probably happened before, and it could definitely happen again. At least that's my take on it.
And you're right about, I'm referring in the question, of course, to modern technology and film and TV series and stuff. But this isn't a modern concept. This has been in play since the dawn of man, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, people are always waiting for, Jesus to come around the corner the next day in the second coming. They've been saying that forever. Prior to Jesus, it was, the next Messiah was going to come. It's a story we tell ourselves, and it's a good story. I think people inherently know that we're treading on thin ice. We're on borrowed time, maybe.
And let's stay with that for a second. How close, we went through the financial collapse of 2008, and we had, the Depression, and we've had many instances of some pretty crazy stuff right in front of us. And, on Friday, we've got the second largest bank collapse in history, SVB Bank, that just seemed to happen, out of nowhere, right? It was just like we wake up and, this bank has collapsed with a lot of money involved and all of the tech. And it just reminded me a little bit of how the tech sector, based in Silicon Valley, is always teetering on the edge too as well. And it controls our communication. It controls our news. It controls our infrastructure and our life. And man, it doesn't take much, like in the case of SVB Bank, but just a couple of comments, and then you have a run on the bank. And our banking system, which controls everything, right, is always teetering on the edge. It's just built on faith and confidence.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, ultimately, so much of, I don't want to get all conspiratorial, but look at your dollar bill where it says Federal Reserve note. That means that you should be able to take that note to the federal government, be able to turn it in for that amount in silver, for example, assuming we're on the silver standard, but really you can't do that. So it's not really a Federal Reserve note because you can't take it to the Federal Reserve and turn it in. So it's all just based on belief in that you could turn it in. And so much of what society is built on is this belief that, we believe in these institutions, that they won't fail us. And that's what kind of artificially holds them up sometimes.
Is that society in general? Is it a belief system just for us to exist?
I think most people are just so busy with their normal lives that they really don't have time to think about these things, or if they do, it's not. That can be dangerous. That could collapse the system. So we prop ourselves up with stories, and they work for the most part until they don't.
Well, and if we go back, there's a reason for this, kind of deep philosophical thought experiment that I'm proposing here. That there's two ways to look at this, but all of this is deep rooted. And if we go back to, something that was a secret at the time and still is, like the Knights Templar, everything, a belief system and a journey is something that when you say belief, it can have a religious tone to it. And certainly the end of the world or secret societies or an agenda, things going on, the end of the world, for instance. This stuff has been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's nothing new. And when we talk about the Knights Templar today, two things come to mind: secrecy and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That's pretty, that's pretty much it, right?
Your mother smells of elderberries.
But
Yeah,
it's
well,
true.
I mean, and to be fair, I mean, the Templar Order started the original banking system too. For example, I mean, it really started out from if people wanted to go visit the Holy Land, they could deposit money in one of the Templar commanderies in, let's say, France or England. And then they could travel to the Holy Land, and there would be less of a chance of them getting robbed by thieves because they wouldn't be carrying any money on them. And then when they got to the Holy Land, they were able to present a note to the commandery in the Holy Land, and then the Templars were able to give them that amount of gold back. So that was essentially banking to begin with. I mean, that's the foundation of the check system, and certainly the credit system that we have now. And the Templar Order took a little fee for doing that, and that little fee added up, and that's part of what made the Templar Order so wealthy for a time.
When all of that ended, and we go up to, say, Friday the 13th, right? If we go to that period of history, let's correct a few things, or maybe these things are already correct. But one of the main concerns was the Templars' wealth and banking system that they had built up, and in a lot of cases, it rivaled, the monarchies and governments of Europe at that time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the real challenges with it to the establishment, in which at the time the establishment was the church and the monarchy, and when the Templars started providing banking and commerce that was independent of the church and the monarchy, even to the point where they started loaning kings money because they had so much extra money. What happened is the money and the banking started going into the hands of the people. And this is part of what the Templar Order was always concerned about, was trying to build rights for people and to give the common people freedom, certain freedoms that they didn't have before. And one way to do this was to try to control the money. And so this is why, the Templars were involved in helping to set up the Magna Carta, for example, which was the first rights for the people, the first contract between the monarchy and the people, ensuring that the people had certain rights. And then later, of course, the Bill of Rights within the forming United States was also, Templars were involved in that. So it's always been a fundamental part of the Templar tradition, and it's also why they've been persecuted at times in the past by the establishment that didn't want the people to have those rights.
And the second, so we had the banking system, and the second thing that history. So I guess you're establishing that point number one is essentially correct. Point number two was the owning of land.
Mm-hmm.
The Templars acquired a lot of property in Europe, and that upset quite a few too as well.
Yeah, for sure. They had part of what they were doing is they had large tracts of land that were donated that they would farm on, and then they would take that food and provide it to the order, and then the order would also provide it to the poor. The Templar Order quickly became the first kind of multinational corporation. They had sea captains, they had stonemasons, they were building cathedrals and churches and commandery buildings all throughout Europe. And there was a lot of money and goods and information that was being transmitted via these Templar channels, and that was fine for the church and the monarchy as long as they felt like they were controlling the Templar order. But when it became very clear that the Templar order existed beyond their control, then it became a problem. And particularly the French king Philip the Fair, he owed the Templar order a lot of money, and he had ambitions to starting new wars, and he needed money to do that. And so he thought the best way he could handle that would be to just wipe the Templar order out and try to steal their money. So, which is exactly what he tried to do. Now, he didn't get it all, but that was his intention.
Now, the obvious thing that is there is what happened to all of the wealth. And so the tracts of land, you can acquire those, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. But we have everything else, and some have, we've got, the Templar treasure and but these deposits of gold were probably in chests all across Europe. They weren't in one specific location, right?
Correct. Yeah, they were definitely spread out. Some of it was captured by the Roman Church and the French government, and some of it was turned over to the Knights Hospitalier, which was a kind of a rival order of the Templars at the time. The Knights Hospitalier later became known as the Knights of Malta. And so they acquired a bunch of that property and a bunch of that wealth, but some of it did disappear and was taken out of the country. And by some accounts, some of it went to Portugal to help fund the newly growing Portuguese government, which was becoming a Templar state at the time. And then some of it was also moved overseas to the Americas with the hope of setting up what they believed would be a new Jerusalem, a new territory where people could have these freedoms. And it became very clear that that was almost impossible in Europe at the time because of the political climate. But they figured they probably could get away with it over in across the ocean. So that's part of what happened.
Now, that's something that Scott Walters, our good friend, mutual friend, talks about quite a bit. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I am referring to that. Yeah, I mean, there were several trips coming over to the New World. The Templar Order had been exploring the New World for centuries before Columbus. Had mapped all of North America, had gone as far down as Panama, and had established relations with different tribal cultures within the Americas. And really, yeah, that's where Scott came in with his research, was his study of the Kensington runestone, which of course was a land claim that was put right in the center of North America in the attempt to claim this territory for the Templars who were already coming over here.
Now, did you just say so the Knights Templar were in Panama before Balboa?
Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, there's a whole tribe down there known as the White Indians of Darien, and they were literally persecuted by the other tribes because when the Spanish went in there, they encountered this tribe of a bunch of white-looking Indians. They had pale skin, they had blue eyes, and they were clearly native, but they also were working with they were native, but they were also had these European features. So it was a threat to the Spanish, because it suggested that there was some other Europeans that had been there before them, and so they tried to wipe them out. And so and then other tribes in the region, in order to not, they didn't want to be seen as being sympathetic to this other tribe, because that would mean that the Spanish would go after them too. So then they kind of ostracized them too for a while. But you can look up photos of these Indians. You can find them on the internet. Just look up white Indians of Darien, and you'll find them.
I'm gonna check that out. I lived in Panama for a few years, and one thing, I mean, Panamanians, right? Okay, so you just have that, right? The national, a Panamanian. But what is a Panamanian? Because when you're there, you see the different slices of society. You really do. You have tribes from the interior, right? That come into Panama City selling their goods and doing their thing. A totally different vibe, Mayan vibe, I would suggest. That's what I was told when I was there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They different Panamanians don't just all look the same. There's a mix of things going on there. Some of it modern, but the deep Panamanians that were there before us, no, they're completely different looking, and I really wondered about that. Now I understand more, right? But
yeah, there were Templars who, as they came over here, some of them just stayed here, and they married some of the local indigenous people, and they set up territories, and you find that both all the way down at Panama, as well as up north in areas of like Nova Scotia, with the Mi'kmaq, for example. In fact, you look at the Mi'kmaq flag; it's the same as the Templar battle flag. I mean, it's identical. So there's a reason for that, and it's because of those early associations.
And what about okay? Well, right now we're talking about North America. We're going to jump back into deep history. Tim is on his way to Egypt on Wednesday. I'm fully jealous. I'm heading back in October, and I cannot wait. It feels like I just got back.
Yeah.
I was there in October.
Once it gets in your blood, you want to go back, right?
Man. How many times have you been to Egypt?
Oh, I've been there about 5 times now.
It never gets old, does it?
It never gets old. Yeah. Every time I go, I see something new, and it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Now, you brought up the dollar bill. Now, I want to talk about that aspect. Well, not specifically the dollar bill, but there is a pyramid on the dollar bill.
Sure. Yeah.
And you look at I've always wondered when we talk about the Knights Templar and the Freemasons.
Yep.
So the Knights Templar are in Jerusalem. Cairo's a couple of miles away.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. In fact, Jerusalem's closer to Giza than Aswan is to Giza, which is where the main quarries were that they got everything. So
That's right.
Very close.
So did the Freemasons visit Giza and Cairo when they were in Jerusalem?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a history for centuries of these associations. I mean, the Templars were they first went down there, clear back in the late 1100s, early 1200s, and they went to the area of Giza. It should be mentioned that the area of Giza, the ancient name for it was Ras Tau, and Ras, and if you start getting into the Greek language, Ras also means rose, and Tau means cross. So the ancient name for Giza of Ras Tau actually means rose cross, and this became one of the secrets behind what was later to become known as the Rosicrucian movement, right? Which had a lot of influence on Freemasonry and other traditions, but that whole movement was started by Templars. So Templars were going down into Egypt. They had a commandery in places like Philae. In fact, there's still Templar crosses all over the Temple of Isis there. Some misinformed Egyptian guides today will say, oh, well, these are just from Copts in the region, the Coptic church in the region, leaving their marks. But it was actually the Templars had a commandery there at Philae, and that's where they operated out of. In fact, the Temple of Isis, the symbol of, here I'm holding it, of Isis holding the baby Horus, that later became that ended up being what the Templars then created as the Black Madonna that was put inside all of the cathedrals that they were building. So they just took that from the Temple of Isis in Philae and they brought it over into Europe and started propping it up as these Black Madonnas. But so they were there. They were also at Dendera. In fact, you can find Templar graffiti at Dendera. They had a little preceptory there. And then since that time, there has been Templars and movements that came out of the Templars who have made regular pilgrimages down to Egypt. And initiations.
I'm going to show really quick while you're talking about this. I could have been faster on the draw, but you caught me by surprise.
Right.
Here is the Temple of Isis, which is okay, here it is here. This is me going past it, and it's on an island right in the middle of the Nile.
Beautiful.
It is extraordinarily great and beautiful. I had a very spiritual experience there. But so at its original location, you're suggesting that the Knights Templar visited this temple?
Yes, and in fact, when you go into that temple, you'll find Templar crosses carved all over the place, even to this modern day, and it's because it was used as a commandery for a time. Clear back in the 1200s.
I have a bunch of interior shots of this too as well. I've got thousands of pictures.
Yeah, pull some of those up. You'll see the crosses.
Yeah, are they on the columns?
Oh, they're all over the place. You'll see them literally on the faces of some of the gods. I mean, sadly, some of it was defaced. There's altars in there that have the Templar cross on them, and yeah, they're all over the place in there.
Now, so let's go back one more step.
Yeah.
To the Freemasons, and were the depiction of, say, the pyramid on the dollar bill, and pulling back further than that. I'm getting a slight echo. If you could turn your speakers down in the studio, it's picking up in your microphone. Were the Freemasons established that far back? The traditions of Freemasonry, can they be traced back to 5,000 years?
Well, not really. I mean, if we're being honest about it, there have always been building groups of people building civilization, going all the way back to Pharaoh Tutmosis III of Egypt. In fact, you go to at Luxor, they have a museum for the Pharaoh Tutmosis III, and they have all of his working tools, which are Masonic working tools that he used, and they include like a square and a compasses and a plumb, and these were all considered like sacred instruments that his priests would use and that his builders would use. So this was This was something that you can trace back that far. As a modern organization, Freemasonry, the earliest records of Freemasonry really go back to around 1598, 1599 with a document called the Shaw Statutes that was drafted up under King James. And some would even take it back further to a document known as the Regis Poem, which by some accounts goes back to the late 1300s, which talks about Masons coming into England. But what we can definitely say is that within the Templar order, there was a whole they had operative Masons. In fact, according to the Templar rule, the only people that were allowed to wear gloves within the Templar order were the priests and the stonemasons. They were allowed to wear these white leather gloves, and it was because of the work that they were doing. And they had, special. They each had special responsibilities that they had to do, but it suggests, the Templars were these Templar stonemasons. They're the ones who built the cathedrals of France and Germany, for example. I mean, even
and those traditions, I would argue, had their foundations right there with the construction of the temples in Egypt.
For sure. Yeah, they mirrored them. I mean, they were built the same idea behind them, where they were meant to be human bodies in stone. In fact, the temple, if you go to one of these temples in Egypt, they're set up like a giant human being, where the sanctuary of the temple is actually literally between the temples, right? It's the reason we would call it temples. The temple of the head, so that's where the sanctuary was in these Egyptian temples. And they did the same thing with the cathedrals themselves. I mean, so they're set up to be like a human body in stone.
Yeah, well, you look at but most of the temples in Egypt, you look at them with an aerial view, and you can see it. I mean, you can see the anatomy of a human. It's completely laid out. The feet, the legs leading into the temple, the body, the torso, all the way to the back, which is the head, which is the main temple area. Okay, but this is the thing. We see Egyptian symbology, not in all, but most Templar and Freemason modern buildings.
Yeah.
Is that out of respect and tradition, or is there something deeper?
It's definitely out of respect of the tradition and recognizing the roots. I will say, from a Templar perspective, and Freemasonry, I could argue, came out of Templarism. The Templars venerated it because they really saw Egypt as the rebirth of civilization after the flood. So they believed that if you looked at the Greek texts, if you looked at the Torah, if you looked at the flood myths of all these cultures around the world, that there had been a previous high civilization. And then when it collapsed, when it fell apart, and this is where we start getting into Younger Dryas talk and all of that, it reset itself up in Egypt. And so Egypt became one of the main custodians of this tradition. And part of what the Templar order was set up to do was to go out and find the different areas of preservation from this lost civilization. And so because Egypt was like the center of that, it became fundamental to what the Templar work was about, and it continues to be venerated to this day. And it should be pointed out that that organizations like Freemasonry, Templars, Rosicrucian, and others, they're structured in such a way that should civilization collapse again, should it happen again, like tomorrow we wake up and there's a massive solar flare that wipes out everything. These organizations are set up so that each individual member has had to study and memorize certain keys to rebuild civilization again, to set up government again, to set up all the things that we take for granted now. These are fundamental to the teachings, all the arts and sciences, everything that we need to build civilization. Each member is instilled with and entrusted with, so that should it happen again, we can rebuild civilization.
Even cell phones?
Well, we don't know that. We wouldn't necessarily know the technology at that point, but we could get to it. We could provide the foundational, things that would be needed to get there again.
Yeah, you're a smart guy, right? You're a smart guy. You're
I
smart.
Try to be.
I'm pretty smart too, right? But if something happened and we lost that technology, but you and I had the resources, right? All of the natural things to build this, and so there's no iPhone happening anytime soon, right?
No. I mean, it could be argued that some would argue that civilization may have been just as advanced as we are right now before it got wiped out before. And it's taken us 13,000 years to get back to this point. So, yes, it's not a fast process.
It's not. And it's a daunting thought. And I'm not in any way trying to be grim. I am merely suggesting that if we lost any leg, right, anything that supports technology today, and we lose any of that, man, right? It would be forever.
Devastating. Yeah, I mean, they estimate that if the power grid went off around the world, from a solar flare or something, 85% of humanity would die within 2 months. I mean,
again, it's back to my opening question.
Yeah.
Right. The fascination with the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it is something that when we look at the different religious texts, the different religious organizations, how many times has the end of the world been predicted, right?
Yeah.
And then you go outside of the religious side of it, and you have the doomsday cults, and you have and forget about Hollywood, but it's always been right there. And I think that in deep down, we know that we're always teetering on the edge. Mother Nature rules this thing. And if Mother Nature changes her mind, whether it comes from space or from inside the earth, it could have devastating effects very quickly, overnight.
Well, I'll tell you, there's if civilization were to collapse tomorrow, there is very little that we have built that would survive, even 100 years. All our skyscrapers, everything else would rest and fall down. Within 1,000 years, it would be like a legend that they ever existed. I mean, the only thing that would still be standing would be the Great Pyramid, that was built before, it'd still be there. I mean, which is an incredible, to be able to test that, it's really quite something. So
yeah, the Temple of McDonald's,
not so much.
The Golden Arches, the Temple, right? No,
Right.
gone. But that says a lot. Well, also, I'm going to go to something more modern, and it blows my mind. The largest obelisk in the world is in Washington, D.C. It's the Washington Monument.
Mm-hmm.
Shaped like an obelisk, but built of blocks without concrete.
Yes, 555 feet high.
555 feet high.
And it's 555 feet high because, get ready for this, we're going to get to some esoteric here. So in traditional flood legends, it was Enoch who discovered these pillars in antiquity that had all the arts and sciences preserved in them. And he took those to rebuild civilization. Well, Enoch in Hebrew, you take the name Enoch in Hebrew, every letter also corresponds to a number. And the name Enoch actually means initiate. And if you transcribe every Hebrew letter for the number it's equivalent to, Enoch adds up to 555. And so this giant pillar that was erected in the center of Washington, D.C. is Enoch's pillar. It's dedicated to George Washington, but it's a giant hollow pillar that could preserve, the memory of a civilization should it get wiped out again.
All of the storms, all of the wind, all of the hurricanes, all of the shaking of the earth, all the natural stuff and everything. And there it stands.
It stands, yeah.
No mortar.
In a swampland, nonetheless.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The movement of the earth. It's crazy to me. But just like the temples, and we talk about the Great Pyramid, but Dendera is still there, right?
Yeah.
And the Abydos and all of these temple complexes throughout Egypt still stand because of the construction methods. And is that part of the intent of the construction of the Freemason modern temples? Like that one in London, that ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean they're designed to withstand time. It's understood that many great monuments have been destroyed through the ravages of time and war and natural disaster, natural calamity. But these things are built to try to withstand some of that. I mean, another example of a pretty incredible structure that's close to my heart is in Istanbul, the Hagia Sophia. It has the largest dome of the ancient world. And there are earthquakes every day in Turkey. In fact, there's just a major couple earthquakes a few weeks ago. But that dome has stood for over 1,000 years, which is incredible. But it has to do with how the energy is distributed and the geometry behind it, and just those principles. So I mean, you want to build these structures that withstand time.
It's not just the stone, right? Stone has a lot to do with it, right? Of course.
Yeah.
There's reasons why we build out of granite to this day, right? Okay, yeah. I get that part. But it's also the actual design and the tolerances and the engineering that goes behind that, because nothing has shifted. Nothing has shifted. Even the Washington Monument, which is modern, right? But if you go all the way back, nothing is shifted in Egypt. The Great Pyramid is the same today as it was 5,000 years ago. If it was built 5,000 years ago, it could be much older than that. But it has to do with the engineering just as much as it has to do with stone, right?
It does, and how you set up the architecture. I mean, a lot of structures that withstand earthquakes, for example, are built with what's known as cyclopean architecture, where they're kind of stacked what appears to be haphazardly, but they're not. I mean, they're built that way in order to funnel the energy and to withstand. It helps them to withstand earthquakes, for example.
There's one aspect to the Great Pyramid. Well, there's a million aspects to the Great Pyramid, but when I found out that it was 8-sided and not 4,
Yeah.
That's an eye opener, certainly. Yeah. But the reason for that is just what you're talking about right there. And it's earthquake proof. Once it's 8-sided, it's no longer symmetrical.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And the foundation that the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids are built on, they're also built with these interlocking blocks, that are designed that way to withstand the earthquakes. So it's pretty incredible. It's pretty ingenious. And the fact that they are able to survey that area, first of all, and find a spot that they know would support that amount of weight, and then to set up these blocks interlocking in such a way to ensure that the energy would be distributed to keep it from falling apart during an earthquake that's a pretty high level of sophistication. And that's just one of multiple instances that researchers look at to say, hey, there was some pretty advanced thinking that went into building this thing. I don't know if we could honestly even build it today with our modern technology, to be totally blunt.
But those same traditions of foundation first, that's went into the cathedrals of Europe.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you have to, most people, we look at the building. We look at what's on top, right? The aesthetic, we look at the build. None of that happens without a foundation, just like ourselves, like our lives.
Yeah.
Right. You have to have a solid foundation. And that's where that tradition comes from, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely where it comes from. And we apply it metaphorically to building a business or building a good family or good relationships with people. We want to make sure we have that good foundation. But the origin of it is absolutely goes back to these building techniques. And there's a lot of phraseology that we use that all the time, that like when we say, we're being on the level with someone, or we're being square with somebody. These are all Masonic terms, or giving someone the 3rd degree. These are all Masonic terms that have been now adopted into modern vernacular, but most people don't even realize where it comes from. So
there, I'm gonna flash up a picture real quick, and I know to most people this isn't an interesting shot, but going back to your point here, this is one of the most interesting shots that I took in Egypt, which is this. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So
there you go.
There it is, right? Yep. So that's right here. That is the last of the casing stones of the Great Pyramid right there. That's what you're looking at. But that's the foundation, right? Yep. And as you can see, I'm alone, right? I'm the only person here in Giza. Everybody else is the rest.
Weird feeling, right?
It was. Let me
you
tell
may see some dogs running by, but that's about it.
If you look really close, you will probably see a couple of dogs lounging out here, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm alone, and so what do I do? What does Jimmy Church do when he's alone at the Great Pyramid? I take a picture of the foundation stones. Because that, to me, you can look at the pyramid, you can look at the Great Pyramid. It's amazing. It is.
Yeah.
The thought of Stone Age man 5,000 years ago just wandering out of the desert and thinking this up, right? Foundation stones. There's no, there's more to this.
Like we need to learn how to farm, and we need to create foundation stones
to support this, right? Behind. And yes, I agree with you. These interlocking blocks, which you can see here, and there's 2 layers of them,
Yep.
In order to, because without this, there is no Great Pyramid. That's it.
Right.
And so it has to start there. And then, but you take it to the next level. Yeah, the foundation. Yes, it was square. It was level. It hasn't moved, right? Thousands of years.
Yep.
It was oriented to true north. Stone Age man. No. The story that they're telling is you can just look at this picture and see that their version of the events isn't the truth.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We find those ancient platforms in three main areas in that part of the world. We find it there at Giza, where the pyramids are. We also find it in Jerusalem, at where the temple was said to be built. So there's, it's called the Dome of the Rock because there's these giant rocks, these giant foundation stones that are underneath it. And then we find the same thing with these ancient platforms at Baalbek in Lebanon. And all three of them have these giant megalithic stones that, many of which we would be hard pressed to even move today with our modern equipment. And yet we're expected to believe that these ancient people that were just figuring out how to farm, we're able to move them, thousands of years ago. And it's kind of, yeah. It stretches the imagination for sure.
Well, it's been repeated many times, but it's something that we cannot forget. We need to keep this on the front burner. And when you look at Baalbek and you look at the Dome of the Rock and you look at Giza and it's not just Giza, right? It's Saqqara, it's Dashur, right? It's all over. And then, of course, go to Aswan and really have your mind blown. So it's not just Giza, but here's the thing with that. They didn't do it because it was hard.
Yeah, it was easy for them.
Because it was easy.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah. Look, here's the decision you have to make today. This is the confusing part. This is why we don't get it. We can either make clothes and farm and domesticate our animals so we can survive, or we can move this 100-ton megalithic block out of a quarry 500 miles away. Well, now the 500-mile journey trek with 100-ton stone, of which there are over 100 of those just in the Great Pyramid, right? 100, not one, 100 of them. So no, it wasn't a big deal, right? They still got everything else done, right? Society still ran, and they were carting these megalithic blocks around and carving them and quarrying them because it was pretty easy.
Yeah, even though we would have a tough time moving them today. I mean, even with our modern equipment, some of this stuff, like some of those stones at Baalbek or the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, we would be hard pressed to move that today, even with our modern equipment. And so
here's the deal. Okay, here's the deal. A modern semi truck, right? Modern, 62,000 pounds. Right? That's what goes in that container. That's right. That's a semi truck, right? So let's go to 100-ton stone times 5,000 pounds, right? So that's 500,000 pounds. 100-ton stone. 500,000.
Well, and some of those stones are like 2,000-3,000 tons.
Look at the unfinished
one stone. Yeah, it's like 2,000 tons.
Yeah. The stones at Baalbek, it's still to this day the only way that, I mean, if you look at it in a modern sense, they carve those in place, right? I mean, they didn't move, or they came from somewhere else, which they did, and they were moved there. And the one that is, cockeyed, that is sitting there.
Yep.
Think about that. And you've been to Aswan many times. You go to Aswan and you look at the unfinished obelisk, which is 165 feet long and 2,500 tons. Now, it's sitting in its pit, but they already carved, 30, 40, 50 of those, and they're all over Egypt. And there's some in London. There's some at the Vatican. There's one in Central Park. There's a few in Paris.
One in Istanbul.
Yeah, there's one in Istanbul. But whoever carved that was standing up on top of the hill in Aswan, right? And I love that view when you go up on the rocks and you look down at the obelisk and you can see the whole thing. And what they had plans on getting it out of that hole. What? Right? I mean, did somebody explain that to me?
Well, and then even, they will say, well, it was carted on the Nile. Well, the Nile isn't exactly near the quarry. I mean, it is, you still have to go over some mountain ranges from the quarry to get to the Nile. So it's not like it's just easy. And then you have to figure out how to get it on the boat. And then once you get it on the boat, how do you get it off the boat? I mean, you're talking about incredible engineering that it boggles the mind.
What I trip on is this. How big is a boat with a 2,000 ton displacement? Okay. All right. It's really that kind of question in a modern sense, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at 65 feet for 100 tons. You need a boat 65 feet long for 100 tons.
Yeah.
5,000 years ago in Egypt, they had 65-foot boats.
Well, and then we're not even talking about the 2,000-ton obelisk.
We're not getting there yet. We're just dealing with, a 100-ton vessel can be 65 feet or more. So I'm not. I don't know, man. I don't know. But before we get to the break, those traditions that came out of Egypt, how important were they for the foundations of the Knights Templar?
Yeah, incredibly important. Incredibly important. But the Templars, again, their mission was to find the remnants of Atlantis. Basically, they believed that there was, a pre-flood civilization that had been preserved in certain areas, and the main place where this was preserved was Egypt. And so the Templars, yes, they visited places in Lebanon. They made association with the groups like the Druze, who were hanging out in Lebanon at places like Baalbek. They went into Jerusalem, obviously. That's where the Crusades were happening. But they also went down into Egypt, and they set up bases of operations there, and they tried to absorb as much as they could and bring that knowledge back to Egypt, including the science of alchemy, which was the science of Egypt. In fact, the word alchemy comes from chem or kemet, which was the ancient name for Egypt. So this was this science that had been preserved amongst the ancient Egyptians that they were trying to bring back into Europe. And they incorporated this knowledge on the cathedrals as they built them. So
let's take our break right here. Stay right there, Tim. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge. I want to talk to you about a very special event coming up July 30th, 2023, the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We're going to honor people who have been contributing to the conscious community for decades. People that you know and love that have helped you get to higher levels of thought and consciousness and awareness. It's going to be a live in-person event, but seats are going to sell out very fast. You want to make sure you're there in person, and guess what? You can help vote for the winners. Voting is available on forbiddenknowledge.com, and the categories are going to be social media influencer, podcast/radio host, TV host, actor, director, producer, entrepreneurs, health and wellness, philanthropists, authors, field researchers, archaeologists, space anomaly hunters, and of course, a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'll be your keynote speaker that night at the Forbidden Conscious Awards. We have celebrity guests performing. We'll have a halftime show where we're actually going to perform music for you. And don't forget about the pre-event mixer, where if you buy a box seat, you'll be in the VIP section, and you also have private access to a VIP mixer with celebrity guests. Shake hands, break bread, network, and then walk the red carpet with us and take amazing photos. It's going to be a night to remember. You don't want to forget this. Make sure you hurry up and get your tickets because they're selling out very fast. I want to see you there. Forbidden Conscious Awards 2023.
On Saturday, April 1st, that's right, April Fool's Day, 2023, I will be hosting the Parapod Festival at the Hyatt Regency right here in Valencia, California. It's a live one-day podcast awards. It's a film festival. It's a full-on media event. We're going to have sky watching. There's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Linda Moulton Howe. Right now, you can submit your podcast, your film, your TV series, any of your paranormal media for consideration. You can do all of that on the links below. For info and tickets, go to parapodfilmfest.com. That's parapodfilmfest.com. April 7th through the 14th, 2023, I'll be hosting and presenting on the Hidden Secrets Seminar at Sea Cruise. From Los Angeles to the Mexican Riviera on the Navigator of the Seas. That's right, up top, a giant water slide. You've got to check out the Navigator of the Seas. It's amazing. We've got Scott Walter, Adam Apollo, Nick Pope, Brad Olson, Vivian Chauvet, Jason Shirka, Robert Grant, Ruben Langdon, and another 12 amazing speakers and presenters. It's all simple to do. Just visit divinetravels.com/Hidden Secrets 2023. You know you want to go on a cruise with me. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Timothy Hogan. I just wanted to mention that over the weekend, I'm gearing up for this cruise, the Hidden Secrets cruise, and the links for it are below. You really want to check this out. I have spent the weekend watching videos of the ship, the Navigator of the Seas, and I cannot wait. This is one of the nicest ships in the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, number one. But number two, everything is on board that ship. And I'm very, very excited about this cruise. And you need to go and go watch some videos of the Navigator of the Seas and see what you can expect on this cruise. So the links for the cruise are below. Go and check it out. It's coming up in a couple of April 7th through the 14th. So yeah, I'm so excited about this. All right, Tim, let's. This is the part of the conversation that I find so interesting, which is the secret. Yeah, the secrets. Alchemy is. It's tough. And the real information about alchemy, the real stuff, you're not going to find that online. You need to go to those that are in the know and basically do this directly, because the stuff that's online is it's not the real stuff. And the Knights Templar, just like what they did in Jerusalem, they acquired the knowledge, right? And that's what they did in Egypt.
Yeah, they were working with a number of groups that were translating Greek and Roman texts where they had learned these alchemical processes from the Egyptians. I mean, most people forget that even most of the Greek philosophers studied in Egypt for a time, and people like Aristotle were studying alchemical texts. And so during the Middle Ages, there were groups like the Sabaeans and the Druze and the Sufi and others, the Islamic scholars who were translating these Greek and Roman texts that were trying to preserve this knowledge from the Egyptians, and so they made association with these groups, and then they also went to Egypt and found these processes on the temple walls and then tried to replicate them. So it was definitely one of the big parts of the Templar mission, and it's also why they developed things like, for example, the Templars used to use certain mold extracts in order to heal infections. Well, today we would call that antibiotics, but they were doing it back in the 1200s. Or they also developed CPR because they realized you could reanimate a corpse by infusing air into it. And they believed that air had a certain vital life principle to it, which was found within the alchemical texts. It was, they called it the mercurial force. So all of these things were part of this tradition that they preserved and they tried to bring back to Europe, as well as other more fantastical things, related to the creation of more exotic substances.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you're referring to, well, we've got a few things we can refer to, but monatomic gold.
Yes.
And the idea behind monatomic gold, well, first off, people see the word gold, so they immediately think of like the gold on that guitar that's right there, right? You think of the color gold, the substance of gold. I've got a few gold things around here I could, and so we think about that, and gold is a precious metal that was used in so many aspects of Egyptian life. You could, the plating of sarcophagus, or the solid King Tut's coffin. Which, think about the weight of that, by the way, the amount of gold that was used for that. But we think of that. But monatomic gold is the breaking down. If we go back to some of and help me understand this, because this is part of your research and your teaching.
Yeah.
Is that in alchemy, so many alchemists, or students of alchemy, I should say, throughout history, tried to turn gold into powder. They tried different aspects of this. This goes all the way back to the Anunnaki and some of the statements that were made there in the Sumerian text as well.
Even Moses, he burned the golden calf into a powder.
That's right. So, but monatomic gold, just in its definition, in the construction of the word monatomic, is breaking down the atoms. Correct.
Correct. Yeah, it's getting it. It's creating gold into, so in a monoatomic state, it has the two electrons in the outer valence ring enter into what's known as a Cooper pair, and they go into a high spin state. And when they do that, they don't bind with anything else. So basically, every particle of this gold is one atom. So it's this very fine powder when you break it down. And according to tradition, the alchemical tradition, certainly the Templar tradition, the Rosicrucian and Masonic tradition, this this was a science that went back to Egypt. In fact, in ancient Egypt, the practice of the alchemy, the completion of the alchemy was known as the Ma'at Ben. And Ma'at just meant truth, and Ben meant both light and stone. So like light from the sun, and stone. That's what Ben meant. And so, in one of the most sacred objects in Egypt was known as the Ben, which was, in fact, what was said to even be on the top of the Great Pyramid itself, was the Ben. And the Ben just means light stone. And if we reverse the word Ben, we get the Egyptian word Neb, which means gold. So these were, the Egyptians did all kinds of word plays like that. For example, the word for brain and the word for consciousness in Egyptian, one was Awas, and then if you reversed it, you got Siwa, and one meant brain and the other meant consciousness. So they constantly took words and then they would put them forwards or backwards to describe their nature and what they did. And so one of these was related to this Ben, which was derived from the Neb, which was the gold. So from the Neb, you get the light stone, and which was this also known as Mifkuts in the Egyptian language, which was this powder that was found, could be created, but it was also found in a region that is rich in turquoise. And so sometimes that word Mifkuts gets associated with turquoise, but it was this white powder of gold that was described even at Luxor in Tutmosis III's treasury house. It talks about white gold as part of the treasury. And we're not talking white gold like when we think about it with jewelry, but we're talking about changing the fundamental nature of the gold so it becomes this white powder. And they would bake it into bread. They bake it into these conical bread, which you'll see on the Egyptian walls of this being offered to the pharaoh. And it's described in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the Egyptian Book of Coming Forth into the Light, or Coming Forth by Day is the other name for it. And it's also found, according to tradition, this same powder was put inside these arcs that were these power generators that are also depicted on the temple walls in Egypt.
Now, we've talked about that, and if anybody wants to really check out a pretty in-depth discussion, check out my TV show, Into the Void.
Yes.
Where Tim and I discuss this in depth with some pretty amazing images as well. And I've seen the conical I've seen that artwork. I never I've heard it explained to me as bread. It was just a strange way to bake bread.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's because when you manifest that mana, when you extract it from, in particular, when you extract it from, because you can extract it from the ashes of things. But when you do that, it ends up forming that shape in the vessel. It ends up forming this like conical.
Oh, I just said Into the Void. That's a Black Sabbath song. My show is called Into the Vortex.
Into the Vortex. That's right.
I was listening to Into the Void right before the show tonight. And so it was, and I was playing it on guitar, and blame that on Zach Wilde. Into the Void.
There are no mistakes. It's all synchronicity. There's a reason why it's there. We just don't know it yet.
Maybe I should have called that show Into the Void.
Well, I'll tell you. You know what I love? That this show is number 1776.
Yeah, you caught that right. Yeah.
My heart for the the 1776, the foundation of the United States of America, and
Well, okay, so let's stay on this monatomic.
Okay.
I'm not going to let this go. This is
Okay.
we're talking about all of the great philosophers who were alchemists, right?
Mhm.
And the scientists of the day. Let's call them the physicists of the day. And it's even Isaac Newton, right? Everybody's chasing the
Absolutely.
philosopher's stone
Yep.
and monatomic gold. So let's discuss this process for a second. Are you starting with gold?
Well, you can start with regular gold and convert it into this white powder. There is a
Well, okay, you just can't say you can convert. How does
well,
that
first you had to break it down with certain acids. There's an acid called aqua regia, which is actually a combination of different acids, and when you dissolve the gold, it'll turn into like a green liquid, and then from that green liquid you could condense it, and it'll turn into like a reddish powder. And then from that reddish powder, you can subject it to more processes, which will convert it into this white powder. So that's one way to do it. The other way is you can also extract it out. It's found pretty much in everything, but you have to calcinate it down to ashes first, and then you can extract it out of the ashes, and that's the easier way to do it, to be totally honest.
okay, I know you've got the secrets.
Mhm.
What's your recipe?
Well, I've done both. It's just a question of sometimes if you're extracting it out of ashes, you also get monoatomic other platinum metals. So you might get monatomic copper, monatomic silver, monatomic platinum, monatomic iridium, ruthenium. So all of these can become monatomic as well. So when you're extracting out of ashes, it's more of a hodgepodge of these different monoatomics, as opposed to when you convert gold into monatomic gold, it's just pure gold monoatomics.
We're not changing the subject. I'm fascinated with this, and most don't know the real history here and the processes that are done. So I'm going to stay on this. But if we back up and we go to the great work of Sitchin and of course the Sumerian tablets, which the Anunnaki were coming here. Part of the reason why they were here, besides creating us, is to mine gold because they needed to turn it into powder to shield their planet from radiation.
Well, that's one theory behind it. I'm actually of the opinion that they were mining it and turning it into a powder because it's abundant here, and that you can use that powder not only for healing, but also for it's a superconductive substance. It's exotic matter. The federal government classifies it as an exotic matter, and it can help produce a tremendous amount of electricity. And it was also helped with levitation. And making things lighter. So, if you're making a ship, which in fact the Sumerian ships were known as Shimana. That was the Sumerian word for it. And the word for this white powder that we find in, for example, in the Torah and the New Testament and other places is known as mana. So there's most likely a correlation between the mana, the Hebrew mana, and the Shimana of ancient Sumer. There's also a correlation between that and the Vimana of ancient India.
Yeah.
So you see the commonality here is this mana.
Now, can you reverse the process?
Yes.
Can you get gold at the end of the line?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the secrets for transmuting things into gold. They're really just converting it back into a gold state. They took this white powder and were able to convert it back into gold state. And by the way, the ancient Sumerian name for this process of this alchemical process was known as Graal, Gra.al, which is the origin of Grail, right? I mean, that's really when the Templars were credited with having the Holy Grail, and they described the Grail as a stone that burned the phoenix to ashes, after which it came back renewed and it restored health to them. They're talking about the same alchemical process. So
somebody just cracked a joke that you look like Tony Hawk.
Tony Hawk. Well, I do have a skateboard behind me. Secret Society skateboard put me on a skateboard. So,
man, can you do a kickflip?
I used to be able to. I have to admit, I'm not as adept with my skateboarding as I used to be when I was younger. My knees just haven't held out.
Yeah, I got a lot of cool stuff with my picture on it. People have sent me. I don't have a skateboard. That rules, man. That's way up there. Okay, so what? Okay, so and I understand what you're saying about the Anunnaki. There were many reasons, many benefits to gold for them. And we just happen to have an abundance of it here. There may be some more out there in the universe, but we had it here, and they were here, and that is that. But monatomic gold and silver, you can find a lot of different reasons to ingest that today online. What were the ancient traditions for creating monatomic gold?
Well, they at least according to our Templar research, I mean, one of it was for ingesting. It was like a medicine. It helped heal the body and made the body more superconductive itself, the body itself more conductive, which allowed the glands to operate more in harmony with their environment, which opened up psychic perception. So that was one reason for it. It also helped heal the body. But because this substance was superconductive, if you put it inside a capacitor, like say an ark, like the Ark of the Covenant, it could produce a tremendous amount of electricity. And I think this was part of what it was being used as well. And I think that's really what the reason why Solomon built his temple, right? He built his temple to hold the ark, and the ark was built to hold the manna. So it all goes back to that manna. And prior to the temple, they put it in a tabernacle with wool curtains, which would help to generate tremendous electricity, static electricity, within in the middle of the desert, with this capacitor in the middle of these wool curtains. I'm not going to let that go, but I'm also not going to let my point go. I'm going to stay on this. I want to learn. I'm learning right now. So how would you, I don't understand, clarify this. How would you ingest, if you wanted to do this for your body? Yeah.
How would you ingest this? Do you snort it? Do you smoke it? Do you drink it? Do you mix it in your coffee? How do you ingest monatomic gold? And by the way, I'm not dispensing of medical advice right now. I'm just asking questions for my own knowledge base. But how would you ingest it?
It would just be put under the tongue. Oftentimes they would actually fast prior to ingesting it, and then it would be taken much like a communion. In fact, it could be argued, one of the places where it's abundantly found, where these monoatomics are abundantly found, is within sea salt. So you can extract it out of sea salt and seawater. And why this is significant is from a Christian mythology standpoint. Let's look at the story of Jesus. Jesus is born from Mary, right? Maria in Greek just means salt water or sea, right? So what happens if you heat salt water? You get salt cubes, right? It's like immaculate conception. Out of the salt water, you get salt cubes. Well, then if you unfold a salt cube, and I say a salt cube because if you look at salt under a microscope, it's each grain is a cube. So if you unfold a cube, what do? You get a cross, right? And out of that cross, hidden within that cube, is this manna. And he's born in Bethlehem, which in Hebrew, Bethlehem means house of bread, right? And so what did you do with the manna? You baked it into the bread. So alchemists look to this story as an alchemical metaphor for alchemical operations that they also found going back into ancient Egypt. Mary was also an Egyptian name, and it was came to be adopted and meant sea by the Greeks, but they got that name from the Egyptians who also used the word Mary. So in fact, the pyramids themselves, the word for pyramid, the ancient word for the pyramid in Giza was myrrh, which is the root of Murray. So yeah.
That's one of the things that I'm telling you right now. Most of this country, they don't have any concept of what happens to your brain when you step onto the soil of the Giza Plateau.
Yeah.
The history that is there.
And you look up at that pyramid.
You don't get it. You don't get it.
Yeah.
That's the ground where Moses walked, right? It's just like, wait a minute, the same dirt. You're at the Mina house having breakfast, looking at the Great Pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And right there is the dirt that Jesus walked on.
Yeah, and according to Templar tradition, Jesus was even initiated there in the pyramid, which and I'm not going to say that's definitively true or not, but there is a Templar, a text published by the Templar order known as the Leviticon that was published by one of our Grand Masters in 1804, and in it talks about Jesus being initiated in Egypt, studying the mysteries there, and according to tradition, he was initiated in the Great Pyramid as well as several other people, including Napoleon later, and we still do Templar initiations in there to this day. In fact, I do them all the time. So it's
when you arrive into shore, right, and you walk up to the bent pyramid, the step pyramid, and you walk and you look at that and understand that now allegedly, I'm just saying allegedly. Okay, just allegedly, it was built before the Great Pyramid.
Right. We go with traditional Egyptology, right?
Whatever, but it is old, and the dirt that you are walking on, and that temple site that surrounds the step pyramid, or the bent pyramid, or the red pyramid, or the Great Pyramid, or even Makura. It's the history that is there, right? So we go and we use all of these names, and we say these names of of deep history. And if you want to know where go to Egypt.
Yeah,
it starts to really hit you. You don't get it from driving on the 10 freeway in downtown LA. It's not the same feeling.
Even Pythagoras studied there in Egypt for decades, prior to settling back near Greece.
I read a couple of quotes from Pythagoras, from Socrates, from Plato, that all say the exact same thing. But trust me on this. This is going to upset the Greek nation, but philosophy didn't come from the Greeks.
No.
Came from ancient Egypt, and they recognize. I have the names. 2,000 years before Plato was the birth of philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, I mean, Pythagoras is the one who coined the term philosophy, which just comes from philo Sophia, meaning lover of wisdom. But Sophia was also, she was a goddess depicted in the Greek tradition, but it was a carryover of Isis. So that's all Sophia was a rebranding of Isis as Sophia, the goddess Sophia. So philosophy was really the lover of Sophia, which was the lover of Isis, and those mysteries going back to ancient Egypt.
Everything was rewrapped.
Yeah,
everything was rewrapped. And now let's. I want to ask you about this breaking news. And we can come back to philosophy. We can come back to Egypt. But another chamber was just discovered inside of the Great Pyramid. Huge news. They did a press conference there in Giza outside of the Great Pyramid where they announced this chamber. And the chamber, okay, well, let's circle back to that. But that's the second chamber, right? In the last 5 years, the other one being above the Grand Gallery, which is ginormous, by the way.
Yeah.
According to Egyptologists, the traditionalists, and the dogma, and Zahi Hawass, there was nothing more to discover. Yeah. Nothing.
The Archon of Egypt.
By the way, I think Hawass and brain doesn't apply to Zahi. That's a whole nother Hawass and Siwa. So anyway, and I'm not going to apologize for being that cavalier.
Nope.
But there was nothing to be discovered anymore inside of the Great Pyramid. Clearly, that is not the case, is it?
No, I think there's a lot more to be discovered in the Great Pyramid. I mean, I do think that this new chamber that they discovered is probably one of the original entrances to the pyramid. I think that's all they probably found. And it may, in fact, lead to that other chamber that goes above the Grand Gallery. But time will tell. I mean, right now they're able to just get kind of a fiber optic camera, I think, through there to see what was in there. They haven't actually been in there yet. And I don't foresee the Egyptian government being very forthcoming about letting people in there anytime soon. But there are, even if you go down to the grotto, the basement of the pyramid, there are areas where you can see there are other hallways that lead to nothing down there. And they clearly went to other chambers or other passageways that have since been closed up. So I think there's a lot more that'll be discovered in the years ahead once they start looking more in those areas. Right now, they've been kind of looking in near the entrance, but as they start to look at other parts of the pyramid, I'm sure they'll discover more.
Yeah, that's subterranean. The subterranean chamber scares me. It's not finished. The tunnel is. Yeah. But it's not. It doesn't appear to be, I should say, finished like the other things throughout Egypt. But that's not what scares me. It scares me because it's frigging old. It's way older than the Great Pyramid, and
it's
certainly
way down there.
it is so deep and so what's the word that unknown. Right, the other stuff feels known. Well, you can understand, a finely carved chamber with, that's a different thing that is going on down there. It's a different purpose. It's a whole. It's not part of the Great Pyramid. It's
Well,
not. It was there before the Great Pyramid.
I'll tell you, if you ever, next time you're down there, if you go back down there in November, when you go back, there's parts where you can have your feet on the ground, relatively on the ground, and you can put your hands up and touch the ceiling. And just do that. Put your hands up on the ceiling and hold it there for a few minutes, and you'll start to feel the energy, like waves of energy going through your body from the ground all the way up through your body. And it's actually kind of draining. I wouldn't do it for very long. But you can tell that the energy is all being directed upwards from there. And you can literally feel the sensations of it if you do that. But it is very draining. I wouldn't do it for very long, and I wouldn't stay down there for very long either.
There is, there has to be, because of the content of what granite is made out of, the sheer weight of the limestone blocks, the sheer weight of the pyramid in general, and the foundation, that there is an energy created from that force. Mm-hmm. That's it. The weight coming down when you stand inside of any of the pyramids in Egypt, and you start to think about what is above you.
Yeah.
Right? And then you understand the energy and the forces that are created, that are coming down. It has to exist. That's it. It's just math, right? It's just it's weight, and it's the content of granite and limestone, and the force generated from the weight combined on the other rocks, and that, and all the way down to the subterranean chamber.
Yep.
Right. No, that has to be that way.
Yeah, it's, I can say from a Templar perspective, when that structure has been used for initiations in the past, the basement part, the grotto, was associated with kind of a baptism by water. And it was believed that the person, as they were put down there in the dark, they had to overcome their fears and their emotional energy. And there was all that weight of oppression on them down there. So this was associated with water. And of course, there's that pit down there that it almost looks like a Jewish mikveh, a ritual bath. And this was associated with water and the emotions and getting a hold of all that down there. As you moved up to the Queen's Chamber was more associated with air and with things of the mind and the intellect, and coming to understand that our mind is a part of a bigger mind that we're all a part of, a universal mind, if you will. And then the King's Chamber was associated with fire, and this had to do with the will and with illumination, and which the Greeks referred to as gnosis, which was divine experiential knowledge. And as you go into some of these places, like the King's Chamber or some of the other places in Egypt, I mean, you have, as you refer to it as the woo, right? You have these experiences that are kind of beyond rationale, but there, something's happening that is transforming you on some level. And
I will experiment with that with the Great Pyramid when I go back, because. And I've said this publicly, Tim, and I'm not here to ruffle feathers. I'm just here to share my experience. Yeah. And I don't want to change or, I don't want to contaminate people's expectations and stuff. But my own experience, the Great Sphinx, spiritual, moving experience. Yeah. Great Pyramid, dead.
Yeah.
And now I can't explain that. It was beautiful, but it felt like it felt mechanical to me. It felt like a factory. It felt empty. It felt void. You go to Dendera, dude, spiritual from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
It's just a spiritual experience. The Great Pyramid didn't do that for me.
A lot of it has to do with, in my opinion, and just based on the rituals that we've done in there in the past, a lot of it has to do with the acoustics. You have to get the acoustics right. Some of those chambers are these resonance chambers, and if you get the acoustics just right, then it triggers something in the consciousness. But unless you're activating those acoustic sounds, yeah, I mean, it just doesn't. It's like being in an old silo or something.
It does have that effect on you. And when you go to any other temple, right, and other pyramids too as well, you see the beauty, you see the art. You go to the Valley of the Kings.
Oh yeah,
and it's just full of art and beauty and Dendera. Aesthetically, if that doesn't change you just by opening up your eyeballs, you've got something wrong with you.
Oh, but yeah, those hallways that you go through, and then you go up to the top where there's the zodiac up there.
I did all of that, and Dendera was just absolutely incredible. And but anyway, so when you go into the Grand Gallery, which visually, right, it's got this it's perfect, and it's friggin' big.
It's huge, just like going in a cathedral,
but void of anything pleasing to the eye. Right? Yeah. There's nothing on the walls.
Yeah, there's no hieroglyphs.
No art, nothing at all. So it's got that coldness to it. That's the word I wanted to say. It feels cold. It feels dead.
Sterile.
Yeah, very sterile. Which is not what I expected. So I think that the purpose of it, and we could, wonder about this and theorize forever. I don't know if we'll ever officially know that its true purpose. I don't think we actually know yet.
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say it's not a tomb, because if you look at the tombs throughout Egypt, I mean, they're highly decorated. They have scenes all throughout them of, from the Book of the Dead and the scenes of the afterlife, the life of the pharaoh. They're painted, incredible details. I mean, you go to any of those tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and there's so much, and you have none of that in the Great Pyramid. Which the only thing you have in the Great Pyramid that has led some to believe that it may have been a tomb is it has this sarcophagus, but we don't really know that was intended for anyone to actually be.
It's pretty small. It's pretty small. Yeah. And the reason why, look at any other sarcophagus, the outer box. Yeah. Anywhere in Egypt, in any museum, those things are the size of your house.
They're huge, yeah.
They're huge.
They're like bunkers.
They're bunkers. And so, because they were like Russian dolls, right? So you have the outer box, and then you have and then you have another, and you have another, and then you have the final wooden sarcophagus that houses the body. So you need a giant box on the out, and that's not unless Khufu was 2.5 feet tall,
right?
The size of that little statue in the Cairo Museum.
Right.
maybe that was life size. Maybe that was 1-to-1.
Right.
It's too small to be that. And here's the other thing. Now the chamber that was just discovered above the Grand Gallery. I have a theory. All right. I've never talked about this. I think about this stuff all the time. This is my demented, twisted mind. I think that grand gallery or the new chamber, that was the exit route. Hear me out. Hear me out. Okay, so originally, if we go with the dogma, there were the giant granite blocks that were dropped, the traps, right? And they have the hoist, or the outside of the king's chamber. So all of when they sealed that up, where did the workers go that were inside of the king's chamber? They had an exit route.
Yeah, they would have had to have.
Right. So they drop, they're doing all the, they're constructing the pyramid, right? And they get all that done. Boom, they drop the trap doors, and those two granite, those were huge. They were blasted out and chopped away. They're not there anymore. But you can see the slots, so we know how big they were. The guys inside had a door, right? And maybe what's above the grand gallery, that's that exit tunnel, and then it dropped off in that new chamber that was just found. And that's how they got out. I don't think they trapped, 50 dudes inside of the king's chamber. That's my theory.
As any.
I should write a book. I need help in thinking this through.
Well, but I do think there's this misconception that the pyramid is completely solid all the way through, and we know it's not. And so there could be entire big areas where there are voids in the pyramid just to keep the weight from being as heavy, and to build it in such a way so it doesn't collapse in on itself as much.
When you go inside of the bent pyramid, clearly they had some issues there, because you can see the cracks in the walls, and they have all those cedar beams, I'm getting all animated here. The cedar beams holding the bent pyramid from collapsing in on itself.
Yeah.
And you've seen it. You've been inside of the pyramid, and that was certainly an issue. And something else could have caused that. But the point is, they had to. And there's also relieving. There's you can't explore it, but you can see it from the subterranean chamber, because you go down in the. Everybody should understand the differences here. Great Pyramid, you go up. Okay, you're going up. You enter and you go up the tunnel into the Grand Gallery, and then up to the Bent Pyramid is the opposite. You descend into the main chamber there. You go down. Go up. And then the stairway is on the inside. But you're standing underneath, and you look up, and what is that? It's like 200 feet, right? That room, that interior chamber.
Yeah,
it's huge. And when you look up, you can see the shape of what's the word for that? There's a word for the Grand Gallery, the stepped ceiling. There's a couple of those inside of the. And so when you're standing below in the Bent Pyramid, you look up and there's a couple of rooms. You can see them, right? With the tunnels going in. Where do those? Man, I would love to know what those lead to.
Yeah, and what were they all used for? I don't think they were tombs. I personally think they could have been used as initiation chambers or places to preserve food or people, during cataclysm. They also, I do think that the Great Pyramid, if you were to, that sarcophagus, the inside of that so-called sarcophagus is the same dimensions as the outer dimensions of what was described from the Ark of the Covenant. So if you were to take an ark and stick it in there, with that mana in there, it could generate a tremendous amount of electricity, and that pyramid just would become like a broadcasting center, almost like the Wardenclyffe Tower that Nikola Tesla was designing.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense. I mean, the tomb aspect of it, no, not buying that. It just doesn't make any sense. You can walk in there and see it. It doesn't feel that way. And the other part is this, and I know this is just my twisted mind, Tim, but go with this.
I'm with you.
Every aspect of Egyptian life was documented, from the very mundane, trivial thing, how to make beer, to taxes and recipes, and every minutia of Egyptian life is everywhere. And so you go to these tombs of different leaders, different towns, and generals and things, judges, whatever, priests. You go into these accountants, right? They had really nice tombs. And so you go in there and their whole family life is there. Everything they did throughout life, everything is documented from when they were a kid to when they were out in battle, in war. Everything is adorned everywhere. It's documented.
Yep.
We don't have one piece of paper about the Great Pyramid.
Right.
It's like, wait, whoa. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Two thoughts. It was built before there was hieroglyphs.
Yep.
Right? It was built before there was writing. It was built before they could document it. I think that is one important aspect. And the second, it wasn't built for somebody. Because if it was built for somebody, I know if it was built for Jimmy Church, Tim Hogan would have a big Tim Hogan face at the entrance there, right? Just like that skateboard.
Yep.
It would be there, but it lacks both of those things.
Yeah, I will say that so back in 2011, I was in Egypt, and I was with a team of researchers, and we were looking at, and I was there with Robert Bouval, and I was doing initiations there in the Great Pyramid, but I was also looking at research that had been done by Gattenbrink, who was a German scientist who had sent a robot up one of the shafts, and he discovered a door, and he drilled a hole through the door, and he put a fiber optic camera through the door, and then they saw another door further up on the shaft. And that was kind of what was revealed to the public at the time. What they didn't reveal, and which has since come out, is he put that same fiber optic camera through the hole, and he looked at the back of the door. And on the back of the door, he discovered these copper hinges, and there was writing in like a red ochre paint. But the problem with the symbols and the writing on the back of the door is they are not Egyptian hieroglyphs. This is a problem because it was put in there when the pyramid was built. So if they're not Egyptian hieroglyphs, then who put them in there? And who, we weren't able to determine where these symbols came from, but it implies someone else was involved in that construction of the pyramid. And Gattenbrink was so freaked out by that he just walked away from the entire project because he knew it would upturn Egyptology. And Egyptologists still to this day refuse to acknowledge it, but you can go online, you can see some of these symbols, and they're not hieroglyphs, but we don't know what they are.
No, we don't. We don't. Before there, I'm going to get to a couple of things before we leave tonight, but I want to stay on this for a second. The part about Gattenbrink, and by the way, when the internet first started, one of the first websites that I found on the internet before search engines was Gattenbrink's door, and the whole research and the photographs and stuff, which was, you remember loading photographs back then? Click, 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 take you 10 minutes.
Yep.
to get a little image up. But the Gate and Brink, the original Gate and Brink website was amazing. He did 2 trips there, and with the robots. But here's the trippy thing. It's not the blocks for me. It's not the pins. It's not even the symbols that were painted there that don't fit history, right? It's not even that. We don't even know what as incredible as that is, here's the trippy thing. You're building the pyramid. You are building those shafts while you are building the pyramid. They weren't drilled or cut after the fact.
No.
You are stacking you're stacking millions of blocks, and you are many shafts are there, right? No. Okay, so but you're building a perfectly straight shaft, and then
only about like maybe 8 inches by 8 inches. I mean, it's not. It's but then like goes for hundreds of feet straight.
Inside of this giant pyramid.
Yeah,
you are so you're laying these blocks, right? You've got to engineer that.
Yeah,
you've got to have a dude cutting these blocks perfectly somewhere. But there's no blueprints. There's no description on how this process was done. And then you build this shaft that's perfect. And then what do? You block it off.
Right.
Twice that we know of, right?
With a door.
With a door, right?
Which, knowing that the only way you could see that door is if you had the technology to send a robot up there with a fiber optic camera to see it.
Why?
Yeah.
Right? It's not the block. It's not the symbol. It's not the why. What's the purpose of that? Why are you building this shaft into the Great Pyramid? Perfect. Little tiny. It's there for a reason. And then you block it off? What gives here? Yeah. So no, is it a tomb? No. Why would you do that? Even if you did it for something as simple as air for the workers to breathe, forget about the celestial alignments, right? I'm with Baval on this and others. Great research that has been on this.
To Orion and
Orion.
Sirius.
So let's say it's just for air, so the workers could breathe. Okay, all right. I'm kind of into that idea. You got to have that's one thing that's in the lack of inside of the Great Pyramid or any of those is the lack of fresh air.
Yeah,
you can smell that 10,000-year-old air when you're in there. Yeah. Man. It's exactly what it smells like. But anyway, you
don't want to burn a torch in there too long.
It wouldn't work. You're not going to light a cigarette inside of the Great Pyramid or anything else combustible. But why would you block it off? Why would you? Why? No. There's something else to it. It's not a tomb. Now, last question of the night, Tim. How do I become a Knights Templar and get all the secrets?
Well, I mean, there are different venues you can go to kind of build your way up to being a Templar. I mean, certainly Freemasonry is one such path where there's you take a series of degrees, and then in the higher degrees they reveal this Templar connection. There's also different Templar lineages out there. I certainly represent one. We have a priest-study body known as the Templar Collegia. You go to www.templarcollegia.org. You can find a website. I think it's being worked on right now, so it might be down, but it's, you can apply and begin a study program where we try to get you all the fundamental things that we feel like you need to know before you're knighted as a Templar. So that's certainly another, venue for that. And then there are other bodies that call themselves Templar, but they're just more fraternal organizations out there that may not necessarily have any great secrets, but they do great charity work in the world and they instill a code of chivalry where they respect the divine in people and the sacred in traditions, and they try to preserve that. So there are different kind of venues there, but
do you have?
Ultimately, the secrets are revealed if you stick with it long enough.
I want the secrets, man. I want the secrets. Do I have to? Do I have to do any blood rites? Do I have to sign for my children?
No riding goats, no blood rites, no sacrificing of virgins, none of that.
Okay, all right. So none of that goes on. But do you have to? Do you have to have a religion involved in your life? Can an atheist become a Knights Templar?
Generally, Templars, all the Templar traditions say that you have to believe in a higher power, whatever that is to you.
Right.
We don't discriminate against. You could be whatever religion, or no religion. You can just believe in, God, whatever you choose to call it.
Could I be
what you call it?
Could I be a Pastafarian?
Well, I guess you could be. Most of the Templar teachings are geared towards certain what are known as hermetic principles, which suggest that all of this creation that we are living in right now is actually within the mind of a creator. So it's all the thought forms, it's all the mind stuff of the creator. So we are living in it. We're interacting with it. We're a part of it. It's kind of like the Force, and in fact, that's where that comes from in Star Wars. Is the same principle,
right?
And but that we are within this mind field, this mind field, not a minefield, a mind with a D field, and that coming to greater attunement with that helps us to navigate our lives better, to live more in harmony with each other, and to live more in harmony with our planet and our universe, and to build structures and such that are in harmony with those universal laws, which are aspects of the mind of the creator. So
are there
any religion and come to that, or no religion and still come to that? So
are there any physicists, hardcore scientists that are true atheists, right? Are they? I know, but are any of them Freemasons or Knights Templar?
Sure, there have been lots of Templar and Masonic scientists throughout history, and in fact,
no, I mean today.
Oh, today, sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know several. They're not common names that you would.
But they're atheists. They're atheists. So when they come in and they believe in a higher power, do they go with that? Do they go with Star Wars and the Force?
Yes, somewhat. They tend to look at more like a quantum field, and the idea of I think it was Maxfield Planck who said that the more we look at the mechanisms of the universe, the more we realize it operates like a giant mind, or mind stuff. And this is kind of the basis of quantum entanglement. It's
okay,
quantum field, what we call the quantum field now, the alchemists of 400 years ago referred to as the ether, but it was the same thing, had the same properties. And it's not unlike what in Star Wars refers to as the Force, so it's, or what the Taoists would refer to as the Way, the Tao, I mean, there's different names for the same thing, but ultimately it's this recognition that we're all bound together and there is one mind and we're all a part of it. And we just think ourselves as separate. But part of awakening is realizing that no, actually we're not separate. And that may be a hard pill for some people to swallow, but it's it's definitely something that the Templars teach, and it's something that we find in ancient Egypt. I mean, this is really the story of Osiris, right? Osiris is chopped up into pieces. So there are all these separate pieces which appear separate and distinct, But then Isis is able to bring them back together into the one. And when she brings them back into the one, Osiris is raised from the dead.
Right.
And now he has this new perspective. Well, this is what we do, right? I mean, we see the world as separate and in different pieces and separate from ourselves, and people as separate from ourselves. But as we come to this greater awakening, this gnosis or this enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, we come to recognize our actual connection with each other and with our universe and with all beings.
Man, what a great conversation tonight. I've learned so much. I'm going to leave you with this thought. All right. Brian Greene blows my mind. And I saw him make this statement the other day. I'm bringing this up because we're talking physics, we're talking spirituality, and you just brought up Max Planck.
Universe is a green dragon, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. So this is what Brian Greene said. He said the Planck scale is so small that if you take a single atom and blow it up to the size of the universe, and that's big. So let me repeat. You take an atom, a single atom, and you blow it up to the size of the universe, that the Planck scale would be the size of an apple tree.
Yeah.
Wrap your head around that for a second.
It's crazy.
That's
well, and going back to that Great Seal of the United States, what does it say on it? It says "E pluribus unum," out of many, one. Right, and this is that same principle. We think we're all separate. We think it's all many, but they all go back into the one. And this is the game. This is the path. This is the quest that we're all on of self-discovery, to connecting with this in different ways. So,
well, have a great, safe trip to Egypt, my friend. I know everybody that you're going there with, and you guys are gonna rock the house. And Sid, my producer, he's on his way.
We'll miss you there.
Yeah, I know. Johnny Enoch's going to be there. Ben's going to be there. You're going to be there. A couple of other friends of mine are arriving later on in the month. I don't want to discuss that live on the air, but you guys are going to have a great, amazing time. And I can't wait to talk to everybody when you get back. That includes you, my friend. So thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with all of us tonight. What a great conversation.
Well, it's great chatting with you as always. Look forward to more in the future.
You're the absolute very best, Timothy Hogan. And the links for Timothy's book are below. You can go to Amazon and check that out. Have a safe trip. I'll see you when you get back.
Great. Thanks, Jimmy.
The very best, Timothy Hogan. And again, the links for Timothy are below. And I think I've even got, I've got both of his websites right there. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Now, tomorrow night, Vivian Chauvet is with us. We've got a great week coming up here on Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, Vivian Chauvet. Let me see here. What have I got going on this week? Oh, man, I can't remember everything. But tomorrow night's Vivian Chauvet. We've got everything up on the website. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. I can't even remember my week here on Fade to Black. Oh, wait a minute. I have it here. Vivian Chauvet tomorrow night. Oh, yeah, Wednesday night, Chuck Fay. He's here from Hong Kong. He's going to be live with me right here in the bunker. He's Hong Kong's radio UFO guy. You all know Chuck. He's with me on Wednesday night. And then Thursday night, Ronnie LeBlanc is with us, Expedition Bigfoot. It's a full night of Bigfoot on Wednesday night. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldridge. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black of the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Vivian, be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.